Hi, I'm Elizabeth Hefner, the campus counselor at West Campus.
I'm Mrs. Campbell, counselor at East Campus. This is our third installment of our Tuesday talk show, Career Talk Tuesday. We're very excited. So today we have two guests with us, a little unusual for us, but it's pretty awesome. We have Mr. Mack from Heavy Equipment Technology and Mr. Heimbach from Diesel Technology. So anybody out in the auto annex is very familiar with these two gentlemen. But some of you at the other campus may not know them or what they do. So we're going to start off, and I think I'm going to ask Mr. Heimbach first. And don't worry, Mr. Mack, you're going to be on the spot soon enough. So Mr. Heimbach, tell us a little bit about your work experience. So how did you get started? How did you end up here?
Okay, so my experience in the diesel field started tinkering at home, and then after graduation from high school, I went into the military, and I was a vehicle mechanic in there for 4 years. Upon leaving active duty, I went to work at Berman Freightliner, where I was a technician for a number of years, a little over 6 years, and then I went to Mayor's Bakery as a technician also, working on their trucks, and found out about the job here, and went into education, teaching diesel technology, diesel mechanics.
So I have to ask you a couple of questions about this, just because it's unusual for us to have somebody on staff who's been in the military, even though we had Mr. Voigt last week, who was also in the military, but that was a surprise. There's really not a lot of us. So did you know before, I know, here we are. Did you know before you went into the military that you wanted to work in this field? Like, did you pick your job? Yeah, tell me about getting, like, how did you end up with that particular job in the military? Was that purposeful? Did it just happen? And
so the recruiter didn't lie to me. I was guaranteed, sometimes they do. Yep. I was guaranteed a mechanical job, but I wanted to work on jet engines, airplane engines, and I was put into vehicle maintenance. I was okay with that because I'm still working on, engines and vehicles in this case, and I had a background in it, so I did okay. I did well, and eventually I got to the point where I wanted to do more with it than the military would allow. That's why I got out of active duty and started working specifically on medium heavy trucks. Went back in the military, got to work on the aircraft eventually, but not as a mechanic. I was a machinist welder.
Did you have to go for more training?
Absolutely.
When you got out of the military?
Absolutely. There's training at every step because things change. Nothing stays. There's certain things that stay the same, but for the most part, nothing stays the same. Things need to be taught, new areas within the field. So you're always going to some type of school or upgrade training until you retire or die.
Well, see, that's actually interesting because we have not heard that from our previous guests.
No.
So now I'm curious if that's something that's specific to your field or just we missed that in the past. But it sounds like you guys are like you're constantly going back for
I'm
training.
sure Mr. Mack will agree. His field's the same way.
Absolutely. Yep. The technology is constantly changing. It requires updated training.
So Mr. Mack, how did you end up in the field? Because I'm guessing you weren't military, probably took a little different track.
That's correct. No, I wasn't military. In fact, I'm a former BCTC graduate. I went through our automotive training program, but what got me interested was probably similar to Mr. Heimbach, working around home, exposure with family. My father had an excavating company, so I was involved working on his equipment, operating equipment. We had go-karts. I remember working on the small engines on those. And from that, I looked into the options at BCTC and pursued automotive mechanics, went through that program. I had a really good experience, learned a lot in the program, and it actually opened up scholarship opportunities for me when I went to college. So through that, I decided to go to Penn College, and there I studied a little different, not automotive. I went instead for diesel and heavy equipment mechanics, which really worked out well for what I'm teaching now.
Mm-hmm. So you had the background in excavation. I'm just curious how you ended up in auto tech and not heavy equipment sooner, because I really thought when you mentioned the excavation, you were going to say, well, I went straight into heavy equipment, but you didn't.
I did not. And the only reason was that BCTC did not have a heavy equipment program. In fact, we did not have a diesel program when I started. Automotive was as close as we could get. If they had heavy equipment or even diesel, I probably would have chosen that path instead.
Okay.
And so going through the BCTC program, and then it sounds like you decided to continue on your education. What kind of things that you saw differences or additions or subtractions? You know, maybe you gained some more at BCTC with a certain subject area. I know you went into a different program, but yeah, what's your feedback on that?
Sure. BCTC, the automotive program, really prepared me very well for a career in the industry and moving on. I learned quite a bit here. When I went to Penn College, I saw that some of those crossover classes, electrical basics and hydraulic brakes, things that were in common, I was light years ahead of them based on their education, or maybe they had very little prior experience. So it really benefited me. I was glad I chose to go to college, but I was also glad that I pursued you said, a twist, a slightly different path, because then I was able to put both of those, groupings together, that I had the automotive background, but then also dove into diesel and understood that. I do have some friends that went through the same automotive program the same year and went to Penn College for automotive. And it's a good school, but a lot of it was redundant. So it was very easy for them, and they didn't quite get as much additional knowledge as what I gained by, adjusting to my path a little bit.
So it sounds like making your education kind of like having a bunch of different areas so you can get a full comprehensive knowledge in a variety of things, if that may be diesel and heavy equipment, and then auto, just so then you feel, did that kind of make it an option for you in your career to be able to kind of pivot into different areas then? Was that helpful for you career-wise?
Very much so. Yep, it gave me a broader depth of knowledge, anything from automotive all the way up to diesel and heavy equipment that I could work on. And I did. Even if I taught here, I'd work at an automotive shop in the summer doing state inspection and emissions, and probably wouldn't have that background or ability if I hadn't pursued both those paths.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So Penn College of Technology is interesting because because it offers our students the career training, and it offers like an associate's degree or a 4-year. You can get a 4-year degree there.
Right.
The ones that I have a harder time wrapping my head around, and so I have a harder time talking to students about, are programs like UTI or ATC. That my understanding is that these are for-profit schools. Tuition is, in my opinion, high. Maybe it's not. You probably know better. And is my understanding correct that students that go there cannot get an associate's degree? They cannot get a 4-year degree? Like, they leave with certifications, I'm assuming, in the field?
Correct. Yeah, the two schools that you just mentioned, they do not offer associate degrees. So what the students would get when they graduate is a certificate, actually the same thing they can get from BCTC when they graduate. So you're right, Stacy, there's very little difference. As far as cost, I haven't checked it recently, but they kind of ran parallel to what a 2-year program would cost at Penn College. Which both are quite a bit of money that they want to consider. I know we have adults enter our program, and they can complete our training programs with far less investment in it.
And still walk away with those needed certifications for day one on the job. And that's what I try to tell my students is, if you're with me for 3 years and you stay focused in the program and you stay on the path, you're ready for employment because you will have the certifications that you need. You don't need to go to another school right away. The schools you'll go to are factory training, for instance, Freightliner or Detroit or Mack or Cummins.
Right.
As those things change, your employer will send you to that training and pay for it. You'll be getting a paycheck and getting the training that you need for upgrade. That's the way our business works.
Right.
So how easy is it for a senior graduating? So they've finished their high school, they've got their certifications. How easy is it for them to go get a job in diesel or heavy equipment? Because I know that there's a lot of students who have just flat out fear that they're not going to get a job. And what kind of pay can they expect?
Well, absolutely. There's jobs out there in our field. Even in the worst economic times, there were still trucks moving on the road that broke down, and they needed technicians to fix them. So I would say, once again, if they're with me for 3 years, got their certifications, they are ready. They just need to, have the courage to take that step. But I had people calling me as yesterday looking for technicians. They say, we'll take a student who wants to work after school, co-op, or do you have any graduates? There is such a need for technicians right now, as we've seen in the past too, but especially
that's
right
awesome
now.
To hear. That's definitely awesome to hear. I do want to ask, because I know we were talking about a little apprehension, students kind of feeling nervous about being able to go out into the field. Would you have an idea, like maybe even just reflecting on one of your interview experiences, and this can go out to either of you. I'm sorry not to choose one, but maybe one could just jump up at, what would an interview look like for an entry level job, and maybe what they should look like too, what you should be wearing as well?
Sure, I can take that one. So I would say it would look like a typical interview. You would reach out to them, send a resume ahead of time. They'd schedule an interview. Interviews are always nerve-wracking, but you want to remember just to be yourself. Share what you've learned, especially our students. They have a lot of experience. They leave our program with certifications. Highlight those, share them, what you can do. Don't oversell it. If you're something that you're not as familiar with, be honest. As far as dress and preparing, I usually advise my students that they want to dress one step nicer than what the work uniform would be. So one tip would be to research the company ahead of time. Most of our companies have websites. Now, most mechanics are going to work in a uniform, so you want to go one step nicer. Dress pants and a khaki shirt would be okay. I probably wouldn't recommend going in with a suit and tie, because that employer is going to have a hard time picturing that well-dressed person as a mechanic working around grease. So I believe in this industry you can be overdressed. But yeah, just one step higher, maybe like what a shop foreman or manager might dress like.
Can I follow up with that then? Because I'm curious about, like, mechanics often have grease because it's everywhere and it ends up under nails and in cracks on your skin. Like, it's hard to avoid that. Shoes often, take a beating because they're the closest to the ground. So any recommendation on shoes? Could it be boots, or should you really have a pair of like loafers, and what do you do about the hands? Do you worry about the hands or not?
You just get them as clean as you possibly can, but evidence that you're working or have the ability to work is in your hands. I look at mine right now, and I just washed them, and I can still see what you're talking about now. So
that's
I wouldn't
okay. If you've got a little.
If I was getting into the nursing, or hospital or something like that, and your hands look like that, yeah, I'd see people a little concerned about that. But in our business, if they come in with grease up to their elbows, that's something different. But the dirt and the cracks, I wouldn't worry about that. You're under your fingernail a little bit. Try your best to clean up.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Shoes?
So with the shoes, I think work boots, as long as they're clean, nicer looking work boots, might be acceptable, depending what you're wearing. I wouldn't wear, obnoxious cowboy boots or anything like that. You don't want them to notice your shoes more than anything else. But I think, dress shoes are certainly fine for an interview as well. Sneakers, if sneakers are a dark color, they'd probably be okay. But same thing, you probably don't want any bright, flashy sneakers that would draw attention away from, your true purpose there.
Well, thank you so much. That's really helpful for our students that are about to go out into the field. I think sometimes we just get a little bit nervous, and it sounds like even just from the last instructors, just practicing what you know about yourself and being able to share that with employers is just important. So you can practice that with you guys, right? Or me and Mrs. Campbell, because we're here to be able to practice that stuff. I just want to ask each of you, as we're closing up here today, do you have any kind of, as you think about your path and how you got to where you are, do you have any final words of guidance that you would for students that are coming out of your program or considering your program?
I always tell my students, don't try and learn the material just to pass the test. Learn the material to know it so you can apply it, because that's why we're putting it out there. Just to get an A on a test and not remember it, it's not going to help you in the real world. Nobody's going to ask you what was your best report card. You might be proud of it, but they probably won't ask you that in an interview. But what do you know? What can you recall? What can you do out in the shop? And that's really what's important. And we prove that with our certifications.
Great.
Take with us. And Mr. Mack will say that we have students build a pretty good solid portfolio that they can take with them on an interview. So if they forget something, they open the portfolio, it's right there for them.
Yep.
Great.
The one thing I'd like to highlight is what Mr. Heimbach said about, the continuing education, whether it's this field or many others. When you go out there, you're going to continue to learn. Whether it's school setting, whether you're on co-op, you're going to learn something every day, even when you're employed. So be prepared for that. Take advantage of those opportunities. There's actually a lot of free training that comes up in our industry. Make the most of it, learn from it, and grow.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you both sharing all this information. It's really valuable to our students. And I hope everyone who's watching enjoyed our Career Talk Tuesday. And we'll see you again next week for our next round. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.